You're listening to The Performance-Driven Warehouse, turning complex operational data into measurable performance. The modern warehouse looks nothing like what it did 20, 10, or even 5 years ago. Thanks to the speed of the markets, tech advances, and changing business processes, the warehouse itself has evolved into a complex network of people, systems, and automation. Balancing all of this to keep on top of volatility, disruptions, and even new opportunities is kind of an art form. Successful warehouse management depends on how well you can see everything that's happening across your network. And that network is powered by data. But what good is all the data in the world if it's not under the right lens and connected in a strategic way so you can understand and act on it? In order to gain the visibility to manage cost, performance, and capacity in real time, you need to unify your data. That's what today's warehouse performance management is all about. Hello, I'm Dan Keto. Welcome to the Performance-Driven Warehouse, where industry experts and operators share how they've transformed data complexity into operational clarity.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere. I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and it is with great pleasure that I am interviewing Dan Keto today. He is the co-founder of Easy Metrics and currently the president. And Easy Metrics is helping us to track labor management and cost to serve. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you.
Well, Dan, a lot of times people aren't tracking labor and they're not actually looking at cost to serve. And I'm interested in your perspective, but let's start. Introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you got into the field of labor productivity and warehouse management and cost to serve.
And that's great. It's quite a colorful story. So I got out of the Navy back in the mid-90s, and my partner Dean and I started a temporary staffing firm, and we quickly realized that warehouse operations had a challenge managing staffing labor. So we took on the responsibility with some of these customers of managing that labor, and we ended up developing an internal software system to track productivity. When we took over those operations to reduce the risk, we would price things on a fixed price basis, so cost per case, cost per container, that sort of thing. So we took on that liability of the labor productivity, and we needed a tracking system to put in place to really optimize production. So that business really took off. It was called Integrated Management Systems. And we grew to about 1,000 employees under management in a couple of places around the country. But we built some really great technology that was transforming these operations. Within the Walmart network, one of the distribution centers we ran went from last to first place within 6 months, and we substantially reduced the cost structure and increased profitability of the operation. So what ended up coming out of that is these companies were saying, hey, if we could get your tools or your software tools, we could do this ourselves for other operations. So we said, interesting idea. So we decided to build out a cloud-based product that we incubated in the company for a couple of years and got some traction, picked up some big name customers and said, we think there's a market here. So we went ahead and spun that company out in 2013 as Easy Metrics, as the first cloud-based labor management application into the market, raised some venture capital, and decided that software is more enjoyable than dealing with the headaches of highly dynamic labor operations. So we sold off the other business and have really gone all in on the labor management side with the Easy Metrics platform. So going to your point on cost to serve, one of the things we realized quickly is that a lot of times you would show improvements in productivity, but then the finance side of the business would say, well, we're not seeing our costs go down. You're saying productivity went up 30 or 40%, but we're not seeing that in our bottom line. And we realized that there wasn't that understanding of cost to serve in the system. So we were the first organization to really bring in true activity-based costing models, leveraging off of that labor management data down to the point where we could tell customers by transaction, what the cost was, because we had the labor data, we had, the employee load and so forth. And so that really gave what we call the fourth dimensional insight into the business, because often you can have gains in productivity under an engineered standard model, but that may not translate into cost savings, because if you're switching from high labor intense workflow from less labor intense workflow, your cost to serve is just going to go up no matter if you're more productive in that harder workflow or not. And the companies tend to, I guess, homogenize their cost analysis, saying, I just want to look at cost per case going out of the facility. That loses the story of the workflow variances that occur. So anyway, I've kind of rambled off here, but that's the evolution that we've gone through, and we'll talk more and more about all the different things that we're doing with this data in the market.
Awesome. Thank you. As you think about changes in mix, big things like kayaks and skis to little things like, maybe it's a box of crackers. And each is not an each. And with shifting economic times, we're seeing a lot of shifts in each and mix. And yet I don't see people in the research really adopting cost to serve. What do you think the barrier is?
I think it's just the lack of the data. They haven't implemented something that gives them that granularity. SKU variability is a huge deal. I remember, years ago we were talking with one of our clients in the hardware business, and they'd have to go pick a snow shovel. Well, a snow shovel is not. It's a unique item to pick. And they would have three different types of snow shovels. They'd have the expensive one, the middle cost one, and then the cheap one. But then you pick another item that's really easy to pick. But they would just take the entire cost model, because they say, oh, it costs us this much to do an item across the entire workflow. Without that information, you're actually going to be pricing some of those units at a loss because you're not taking into account your distribution cost in that. And so some of our more sophisticated clients, what they were doing then is taking that granular cost to serve data that we bring to the table, and they actually gave that to their sales teams to make sure they incorporate it into their pricing structures when they take that to the market. Because ultimately you want to make money on everything you're doing unless you have a loss leader strategy. So, going to your question, it really is lacking the data sophistication in that model. And really the only way to do this is with the labor management model. It's very difficult to do this off the just pure WMS data, because in the labor management side, you break down the granularity of each component of the process, time on that component with the labor cost that gives you then that visibility in that cost to serve, as that item moves all the way through the facility.
So another challenge that I see in the research is people don't have one WMS, they have multiple, and they will have third-party relationships, and those third-party relationships and warehousing will change, and they see that as a barrier to be able to do this. What's your response to that?
There's a couple components to that. If you have access to the data, then that can be overcome. And what's nice now is we have a lot of really great data warehouse technologies out there that make it much easier to at least get the extractions of the raw data. One of the things that we're preaching continually to the market is the need for the unified data model. Because organizations, even if they're running on the same WMS, may have a network of facilities, they often will have different data taxonomy for each facility, because when they set the WMS up at that facility, they're just thinking at a local level, not across a network level. So getting your data taxonomy standardized is critical. The way we do things, because we're able to take all those data abstractions and standardize everything on the back end, even if they don't change the taxonomy in the WMS, we're able to unify that into one seamless story for them. So as long as you have the data access, there's many different ways of building that common taxonomy to then be able to do the things with the data to extract the cost to serve and performance and so forth. If you can't get access to the data, which sometimes when you have a third-party relationship, that does pose a problem. We see that a lot with 3PLs who might be working on a WMS of their customers. And so the customer, to get that data, requires an IT project on the customer side. And then that creates a challenge to get to that information. So the point on that would be for the 3PL to show their customer the value of the data and how that will translate into better savings and better service if they have that information.
So would it be fair to say that you provide that unified data model?
Absolutely. That's our absolute core emphasis now. And we've really expanding labor management into what we call warehouse performance management. So we're extending our analytics and our modeling beyond just the labor. For example, you have an employee who's on a forklift. doing a process. Well, I have the cost of the forklift from the lease cost. I have the maintenance and energy cost. I can then allocate portions of that cost for the time that person is performing a certain process. So I can then stack the equipment cost on top of the labor cost. And then one of our clients, we actually then bring in the revenue model because they're a 3PL. And so we now give them that transactional visibility so they know what the cost and profit is for everything that they're doing.
That's very cool. Now, one of the issues, I mean, you talked about assets, and we're doing a lot of work around robotics. Labor's tough in a lot of regions, and asset data is not always available. What's the barrier between labor planning and actually taking into consideration what's happening in robotics and automated put away? What's your perspective there for clients?
That's a challenge. I mean, I'd say right now, one of the biggest barriers for a comprehensive, holistic view of your warehouse operation is getting access to all of that data. The automation vendors right now are a little resistant to expose that data because they're still working through on their end all the value in the data. With what's happened in the market over the last many years is everyone realized data is gold, and so they don't maybe know exactly what gold is in the data, but they're not willing to give that data up. I see where the industry is going is we're going to have a hybrid model of labor in automation. You're never going to get rid of labor completely. It's going to be a hybrid environment. So the dynamics are going to change a little bit as far as how labor management works, but bringing those data sources together into a holistic picture will be critical. Your automation vendors generally are automating certain components of a warehouse. They're not automating the entire warehouse. If you want to go with a fully automated warehouse, you may have 10 different systems in there. Well, how do you get all of that data out so it's talking to each other so you have that comprehensive analysis? And I would say this is one of the big challenges in the industry right now is getting access to that data, getting people to understand that exposing that data actually will drive more uptake of those products, because then you really can see the objective ROI that those things create for you. But again, it has to be looked at from a holistic picture, because optimization of one process can often create different cost effects in other processes, and you just need to understand that story.
So if you were a business leader running operations, would your recommendation be to pressure the material handling vendors to open up their data, or what would be your recommendation?
Yes, I would. I think as you're going through the contract negotiations with them, you want to have make sure, because in a sense, they will argue it's their data because it's coming from the equipment and maybe you're leasing the equipment, but ultimately that data helps you best run your operation. All these things are in silos right now. We're going through this. We're refragmenting the data in the market in a sense. I mean, we had the enterprise plays, 2 decades ago that consolidated data with cloud services and all these new technologies. We're refragmenting the data. We now need to move back towards more of a data consolidation model where you have the ability to bring it all together to tell the story.
How big of a barrier is it to do this? How long does it take you to actually implement with your clients? Let's say you've got a company that has some 3PLs and very different warehouse management systems. How long does it take?
Labor management has changed dramatically as far as how the go-to-market approach. Originally, it was a very big engineering project. You would often spend a year going through all the work to set it up before you even turn it on. And with labor management, the work is the change management that comes after you've turned on the switch. So you kind of hit that fatigue level. Okay, the project's done. Now we're ready to go live. Everyone's exhausted. Now you got the real work, which is the change management. So what we did is we took a very different approach to how to execute into the market. And so we can get time to value for customers within 30 days. Now, is that a fully optimized, fully engineered facility? No. But you can get time to value because now you understand what your utilization is. When you look at any operation, if you're not measuring at a granular level, you're going to have a lot of missing time, which is time I don't know what people are doing because it's not being tracked. So we are able to get clients within 30 days or less, given that full visibility, start managing to their indirect time. And then during that process, we're scrubbing the data, getting everything tightened up. And then we can then bring through the labor standards to then you're now driving towards that productivity level.
And how long does it take to get to those labor standards?
Generally within 90 days, at the end of the 90-day period, yeah, you will have a full labor standard driven model, and then you're driving to that change management. But again, the neat thing is we usually, once we get the data flowing through the system, we can drive a good 5% of cost out of the system because we're identifying the missing time and driving that out. And then the next stage is getting all that indirect time optimized for the type of operation. So you pick up another couple percent of savings, and then you're into that productivity management. Then after that, we layer in the costing, we layer in the profitability, we layer in all these other layers. It's just, if you try to do it all at once, it's just overwhelming. And so we incrementalize it so they're getting that value return very quickly. I often relate it to having hip replacement surgery. The old days, you'd have it and you'd sit there till you're healed. Well, nowadays, they want you up there walking on your feet right away. We try to get people walking as fast as possible, so they're getting the value. And once you get that value going, it makes it much easier to continue to change and drive the value.
I like your hip replacement analogy. So, okay, let's say now I've got the labor standards. In an ideal world, what do you think I do with it? Because a lot of my clients think about supply chain in a very supply-centric way. It's kind of warehouse management for warehouse management. Well, once I know that cost per customer, what ideally do you think I do with it?
So with labor management data and costing, the key to having the costing in there is it really calls out to where the value stream is. When you have engineers, they tend to focus so much on the engineering data and getting everything perfect. Bringing in what that dollar value is helps prioritize things, because we all always have a million priorities. The key is knowing what are the priorities that I want to focus on. And so when you layer in cost to serve on top of labor management, it really helps guide where we focus to drive that ROI. So you start with the big chunky things, and then you worry about the tails later as you've optimized to that level. The other thing within the data, what's really fascinating for us is the stories that come out of it. So we came up with a concept years ago that was first in the industry, is looking at metric ratios. So when you look at a labor standard, you may have 15 or 20 components that roll into the labor standard, but there might be key ratios within those metrics that tell you, is that process really healthy? A common one would be feet travel per line pick. If I'm looking across a network of facilities, and one of my facilities has an exceptionally high feet travel per line pick relative to the others, that tells me I haven't laid my warehouse properly. My fast movers should be closer to the shipping dock versus at the other side of the warehouse. And so the data tells you so many stories. And the neat thing is with AI now, we're able to help find those stories for customers and bring that to the surface versus them having to go do that discovery and find them themselves.
I think that's great. Anything you want to share before we wrap up here today? Thank you for joining our show.
Yes. So I would say the number one topic that everyone is wrestling with is AI. AI is
AI everywhere, but nowhere, right? It's like
exactly
we're in the middle of this hype cycle.
Yeah, there's a huge hype cycle. AI, like the .com, is going to change the world, but we have to go through the chasm of disillusionment. And I think we're probably getting to that point now where I need to get ROI on these investments. The foundational layer for AI is the unified data model. So companies need to step back, look at their data as a strategic value for their business, and then bring all the stakeholders around the data into the conversation. So you have finance, you have industrial engineering, you have operations, you have leadership, HR, IT. You need to bring all these individuals into a room and then begin this discussion and how to build this. So the scoping phase takes time because you want to align your data to all these individuals. And when you do that, you build this beautiful foundational layer that then unlocks the magic for your operation. So I would just advise companies, understand your data is a tremendous value, but you need to take a thoughtful approach and not just slap a bunch of technologies on it thinking you're going to get magic out of it, because all you're going to do is get a big bill and bad results.
I call that AI stupid, and it's so important to have a common data model, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining the show today. And if people want to contact you, would it be easymetrics.com?
Yes, absolutely. Go to easymetrics.com and lots of information there about what we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Laura, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Take care. Subscribe to the Performance Driven Warehouse wherever you get your podcasts. For proven data strategies and guidance on warehouse performance management, visit easymetrics.com. Until next time, let data lead your performance and never stop improving. Keep turning complexity into performance.